If you've turned on the news lately, apparently the economy is doing great.
U.S. consumer sentiment surges to a 5-month high. And solid economic data gives the Federal Reserve all the more reason to pause.
People are confident in America today.
We do have the best economy in the world.
And America is booming.
You've probably seen the charts. GDP is up, stock market at all-time high, and unemployment is near historic lows. And the headlines insist the economy is booming. But when you look at your bank account, or you try to book a flight, or you stand in the checkout line at the grocery store, something feels fundamentally broken. It feels like you're getting poorer, even though the news say you're getting richer. The media will say this is just you being pessimistic.
Experts saying there is not any kind of recession. By the way, I just showed you all these quick tour through the charts showing all the positives, but some call it a vibe session.
Period of temporary vibe decline, where economic data such as trade and industrial activity are relatively okay, but people still feel bad.
But the reality is that this is not a mindset issue. It is a structural split between the economy of income and the economy of assets that has been widening for 40 years. This is why your six-figure salary says you're wealthy, but the reality of purchasing a home says you are priced out. In today's video, we'll take a deeper look at the mechanisms that created this disconnect. We will look into the flawed inflation metrics that hides your true cost of living. We'll expose the tax trap that punishes your raises, and finally, the global shift that separates hard work from wealth creation. To understand why the economy feels so tight, we first have to look at the ruler we use to measure it. For decades, the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, was a fixed basket of goods. It asked a simple question: how much does it cost to buy this exact same list of items compared to last year? It was a cost of goods index. But in 1996, a group called Boskin Commission argued that this method was overstating inflation. Their logic was that when prices go up, rational humans adapt. They argue that consumers don't just blindly keep buying the exact same expensive items, they switch to cheaper alternatives to save money. So the government shifted the philosophy of the CPI from the cost of goods index to a cost of living index. But before we expose those economic illusions, I want to talk about digital illusions, specifically the ones that trick you into thinking you're safe when you're not. That is why I'm partnering with CyberGhost VPN for today's video. We all use incognito mode because we think it makes us invisible, but that is effectively a lie. Your internet service provider, your employer, and the websites you visit can still track everything you do. I've been testing CyberGhost myself recently, and it is the only way to actually opt out of that surveillance. You click one button and it encrypts your traffic and reroutes it through secure servers. No one sees what you're doing, not even CyberGhost, because they have a strict no logs policy. But for me, the real value, especially when we're talking about getting more for your money, is the streaming benefits. I've used it to unlock content on Netflix and Disney Plus that is geo-blocked in my region. You're basically doubling the value of the subscriptions you already paid for just by changing your virtual location. And it works on 40 different streaming services, so you're covered. It works on all major devices and operating systems, and one subscription works on 7 devices at the same time, so you can even share with friends and family. There's a reason why they have 38 million users and a massive 4.8 rating on Trustpilot. It just works. Right now, if you use my links in the description, you can get their best deal ever, 84% off plus 4 months completely free. That comes out to just $2.03 a month. They also have a 45-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it completely risk-free. Stop letting the system track you for free. Click the link below to protect yourself now. Now, there is a popular myth online that says CPI simply swaps steak for chicken to hide inflation. That isn't true. The reality is more subtle, but equally damaging to your wallet. The Bureau of Labor Statistics uses a formula that accounts for substitution within categories. Here's how it works. If the price of a premium ribeye steak skyrockets, the formula assumes you're smart enough to switch to a cheaper chunk roast. If your favorite brand of premium ice cream doubles in price, it assumes you switch to a generic store brand. Because you switch to the cheaper item, your total spending at the register might stay relatively flat. Therefore, the CPI reports that inflation is under control. But here's the structural flaw. The CPI is measuring the efficiency of your spending, not the quality of your life. To an economist, switching from ribeye steak to chunk roast is just rational substitution. But it ignores the fact that the only reason you didn't spend more money is that you accepted a lower standard of living. But the substitution bias is just the appetizer. The main course is housing. Up until 1983, the CPI tracked the actual cost of buying a home. It factored in house prices and the mortgage interest rate. But this became volatile due to the wild swings of the high interest rate in the late 70s. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics made a critical switch. They stopped tracking home prices and started tracking something called the owner's equivalent rent.
In the United States, 1/4 of the inflation basket is a price called owner's equivalent rent. And it's a complete fantasy price. It's a price nobody pays.
Or owner's equivalent rent. And what I will tell you, maybe to make the long story short, it's an effort not to include asset prices in the CPI.
This is a survey where they ask homeowners, if you were to rent out your house today, how much do you think you could get for it? It is a hypothetical estimate of rental value, not the capital requirement to purchase the home. And this creates a massive divergence. Over the last decade, we have seen home prices, the actual cost to buy a home, explode upwards due to low interest rate and high demand. Just look at this chart. To understand what you're seeing, look at the far left. The baseline is 1950. Both lines started at 0%. This is our starting line. The numbers on the right don't represent the price of a house, they represent the cumulative percentage growth from the 1950 starting point. For 50 years, the black line, that is everyday inflation, and the red line, representing home prices, moved in lockstep. A house gets more expensive at roughly the same rate as a gallon of milk. But look at the right side of this chart. Around the year 2000, the red line completely detached. By the year 2023, while the official cost of living grew by roughly 1,000% compared to the 1950 baseline, the cost of owning a home skyrocketed by over 2,500%. That massive vertical gap between the red and black line is the hidden inflation that the government explicitly excludes from the CPI data. So you have a situation where the official cost of living index, which determines your raises and your social security adjustments, is completely detached from the cost of a home ownership. The CPI became a measure for the cost of surviving in a rental economy, not the cost of thriving in an ownership economy. And that disconnect is why you feel crazy. You're playing a game where the goalpost, being financial independence and home ownership, is moving at 100 miles an hour away from you. But the speedometer, the CPI, is only showing 20. You might be thinking, why would this be a problem? Just work harder and make more money to beat inflation, right? Some people may even say that people who complain about inflation are just lazy. But the truth is, even if you manage to hustle, get that promotion, and beat the manipulated inflation numbers, you will still run directly into the second structural trap that is designed to hold you back. Let's walk through a scenario. Meet Michael. Michael is a high performer. He works in tech, he lives in a major city, and he's doing everything right. After 3 years of grinding, he finally gets a tap on the shoulder. He's now being promoted to manager. That is a big moment. It comes with a 10% raise. But Michael knows the reality. This promotion isn't free money. It comes with twice the responsibility, late night emails, and the level of stress that follows him home on the weekend. But he takes it because 10% is a massive bump, right? Well, let's run the real math. Because Michael is already a high earner, that extra money doesn't land in his bank account. It falls directly into the highest marginal tax bracket. Between federal tax, state tax, and payroll taxes, the government takes roughly 40% of that new money immediately. So right out of the gate, his 10% raise is actually just a 6% net increase in cash flow. Now, here's where the math gets ugly. We have to adjust that 6% gain against the reality of the last few years. The media keeps telling Michael that the inflation is cooling to 3%, but that is a year-over-year number. If you look at the cumulative inflation since 2020, the cost of food alone has gone up by roughly 28.13%. The price of insurance, property tax, rent, and childcare hasn't gone up by 3%. It has exploded. So Michael is sitting there with his 6% net raise, trying to fight a 28% increase in the cost of his existence. When you do the final calculation, you realize that Michael is currently underwater. He signed up for a harder job, more pressure, and less time with his family, yet his real purchasing power is far lower than it was 3 years ago. He's working harder than ever just to get poorer every year. This is a silent killer of the working class. The tax code is effectively a fossil. It assumes you still live in a world where a dollar is a store of value, where you could walk into a bank and exchange paper for gold. In 1980, earning $100,000 was a massive feat, effectively making you the rich. So a high tax rate made sense. But we don't live there anymore. We live in a world of devalued fiat currency. Since 1980, the purchasing power of the dollar has collapsed.
And in fact, go further back to 1980. Before I was born, your $100 was worth the equivalent of $359 today.
You now need roughly $380,000 today to buy what $100,000 bought back then. But the tax code hasn't fully adjusted for this reality. It still treats a six-figure salary like the wealthy elite. And the system loves this. It is incredibly profitable for the state because the tax revenue rises with inflation. But it is devastating for you. Your labor is being devalued at 2 points. Once when the money is printed, and again when the money is taxed. But now the question is, why is it so hard for Michael to get a raise that actually beats inflation? Why have wages stagnated for 50 years while productivity has gone through the roof? The answer lies in a geopolitical shift that happened in the 1970s, which broke the link between how hard you work and how much you get paid. If you look at this chart of US productivity versus hourly compensation from 1948 to 1973, the two lines move together perfectly. If a company figured out how to make 10% more widgets, the workers get paid roughly 10% more. It was a symbiotic relationship between labor and capital. But around 1973, those lines split. Productivity kept climbing in a straight line up, but wages went flat. This is often called the Great Decoupling. Now, there are a million theories about why this happened. The gold standard, unions, tax policy, but the most compelling business explanation is the introduction of the Global Labor Arbitrage. In the mid-20th century, labor and capital were stuck in the same room. If General Motors wanted to build a car in Michigan, they needed both the factory and the workers in Michigan. Neither could easily move. If the factory made a ton of money, the workers had leverage to demand a share of that. Because the factory couldn't just pick up and move to Vietnam overnight. But then, technology and globalization changed the rule of physics for business. Suddenly, capital became mobile. You could move money, blueprints, and logistics across the ocean with a keystroke and a shipping container. But labor remained geographically fixed. The workers cannot instantly move their families to Bangladesh to compete for a job, nor do they want to work for Bangladesh wages. This created a leverage imbalance. Corporations could now access a global workforce to minimize labor costs while selling their products to a wealthy Western consumer base. So when technology made companies more efficient, the gains from the efficiency didn't go to the worker. Why would they? The worker is now easily replaceable in a global market. Instead, the gains accrued to the things that was scarce and optimized: capital and the shareholders. This is why record profits often coincide with layoffs or stagnant wages. It's not necessarily malice. It is the code logic of a globalized market. The system is designed to reward the mobile asset, which is capital, and squeeze the fixed asset, that is labor. This distinction, labor versus capital, is the defining struggle of our time. But what happens when the worker realizes they can't win? What happens when a generation looks at this rigged system and realizes the finish line is moving faster than they can run? For generations, the American deal was simple. Work hard, save your money, and eventually you can buy a piece of the future. You can own a home and retire. But humans are smart. They're rational actors. And when a rational actor is tasked with a math problem that cannot be solved, they stop trying to solve it. The current generation is looking at the math of addition versus multiplication. The average worker saves via addition. Maybe you scrape together $500 a month, that is $6,000 a year. But the asset prices, like housing, rise via multiplication. If a $500,000 home appreciates by 10% in a year, that is $50,000. Your savings literally cannot catch up to the asset appreciation. So what is the rational response to this? It's what the media calls doom spending.
Homeownership or starting a family is so out of reach.
I think that people want to treat themselves to small luxuries
that'll bring us a semblance of the kind of adulthood we were promised.
Doom spending. I love it.
It kind of makes us, feel a little bit happier about the situation. So if it's going to be like this regardless, I might as well get something for myself that I like and enjoy.
For me, it's like shopping,
clothing,
travel.
It does alleviate some of the stress.
Doom spending is like retail therapy with a fatalist twist. A lot of people feel hopeless or pessimistic about their financial futures, and that's manifesting in a lot of different ways.
You see young people buying $7 lattes, booking trips to Europe, and buying luxury handbags, even though they have no savings. The older generation looks at that and screams, if you stop buying latte, you could buy a house. But the math says otherwise. The young person knows that cutting out that latte saves them $2,000 a year, which gets them 0.01% closer to a down payment on a house that will rise in price by another $40,000 by the time they finish saving. So the logic flips. If the future, represented by home ownership and financial stability, is mathematically impossible to buy, why sacrifice the present for it? You might as well consume now. You might as well enjoy the latte and the trip to Greece. Because that $2,000 isn't going to change your life in 10 years, but the experience changes your life today. It is a shift from prioritizing long-term capital accumulation to prioritizing short-term experience consumption. It looks like irresponsibility, but it is actually a form of economic despair. It is the realization that the ladder has been pulled up, so you might as well enjoy the view from the ground floor. This behavior keeps the economy humming, consumption stays high, but it hollows out the financial stability of the future. It marks a transition from a society of owners to a society of renters. So where does this leave us? We're witnessing the rise of the rentership economy, a world where you own nothing and subscribe to everything. You subscribe to your music, your movies, your software, and increasingly your housing. The moral of this story is not to say the system is evil. It is simply to say that the rules of the game have fundamentally changed, and you need to update your strategy book. The harsh reality is that labor creates income, but only capital creates wealth. If you rely solely on your paycheck, no matter how big it is, you're running on a treadmill that is programmed to go faster than you can run. You're fighting the CPI, the tax code, and the money printer. The only way to win is to stop playing the game of labor and start playing the game of capital. You have to convert your income into assets as fast and as aggressively as possible. This doesn't mean you need to be a millionaire tomorrow. It means you need to understand that cash is a melting ice cube. You cannot save your way to wealth in a fiat currency system. You have to invest. You need to buy the things that the institutions are buying. You need to own equities, real estate, or scarce assets that benefit from the money printing rather than being diluted by it. It means dollar cost averaging into the S&P 500 or total market index fund, not as a nice to have, but as a survival necessity. The disconnect you feel between the news and your wallet is real. The structural traps are real. But now you have seen them. You can stop fighting the current and start swimming with it. The era of the saving saver is over. The era of the investor has begun. Before you go, don't forget to protect your online privacy with CyberGhost VPN. Use the link in the description to get 84% off and a 4-month free. It's just $2.03 a month and completely risk-free. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this type of content, please consider like and subscribe. This has been Plain Capital, and I hope to see you next time.